Mic Drop Moments is sponsored by Grow Radio. Want to launch your own podcast? Grow Radio are here to help. Grow Radio has launched and supported countless podcasts, and they'd love to do the same for you. Just hit record and they'll handle the rest. No editing stress, no technical faff, just a great podcast released when you want. Need a little extra support? Grow Radio's workshops and courses make getting started easy. Let's bring your podcast to life. Message Grow Radio on social media or reach out to Gary Jones, the founder of Grow Radio. Let's make this happen. Welcome to Mic Drop Moments. Today I'm chatting with Lisa Archer, and I'm going to let Lisa introduce herself. Hello, Lisa. How are you?
Hi, Sandra. Thank you so much for having me. Yes, my name is Lisa. I am a holistic life coach, and grief educator. And I, more importantly, just got married. And I have two adult daughters, Bree and Alexa.
Well, beautiful names. I detect a slight accent there. Where do you originate from?
Yes, yeah. I am from Seattle. So we came to the UK, it'll be 20 years in December.
Wow. And the only thing I know about Seattle is where they filmed Sleepless in Seattle, and it rains a lot. Is that right?
It's very true. So we didn't really have to adjust to the weather when we came here. It's almost exactly the same.
Oh, wow. So British weather in Seattle, a place I've always wanted to go, probably because I watched Sleepless in Seattle too much, but there you go.
It's a great film.
Yeah, it is. So tell us a little bit about what you do, Lisa.
Well, I am an international certified and accredited life coach and grief educator, like I said. But that is an interesting combination of life and loss. And that doesn't happen. I don't see that a lot, but because of my own experience, I'm able to have my life experience come into play. And so I really just hold space for those who have experienced any type of loss.
Mm.
So not just the loss of a loved one through death, but it could be divorce, parental alienation, it could be any type of loss.
That's interesting, isn't it? Because yeah, we can loss can come in all shapes and forms. It could be loss of a job, it could be loss of a relationship, it's loss of a loved one, as you say, loss of a pet. Which I do remember when I lost one of my dogs, I was more upset. I think I cried more for that dog than I did when my dad passed away. But it's strange, isn't it? Loss hits you when you least expect it as well.
Absolutely. And I think with the like pet loss, some people be like, oh, it's just a dog, or it's just a job, or you didn't need him anyway or her anyway. And we fail to recognize sometimes the deep impact of that grief and having the space in which to do so.
So let's dig back because I love people's backstories. So, what is your backstory? How did you get to where you are now, and why are you doing what you do now?
Yes. So I growing up, I just didn't have much loss. I lost maybe a grandma, my aunt, but I was young. So I hadn't experienced a lot of loss. And like I said, we moved from Seattle to the UK. We're nearly 5,000 miles away. My parents aren't getting any younger. You you just know that these calls are going to come. And so I hadn't really had experienced much loss. And in 2018, January, I received a call that my niece from my ex-husband's side of the family passed away from a hereditary illness. And a week later, I received the call from my mom that said that she told me that my dad was diagnosed with brain cancer. And that really was when kind of the rug was pulled out from underneath me. I worked in corporate here in the UK, and I quit my job and moved back to Seattle to take care of my dad and my mom because they'd been married forever. And so, and the family, my brother and his children. So I did that, and I stayed there for 7 months until my dad passed away. And then I came back to the UK and closed the curtains. I didn't want to talk to anybody. That was kind of my way of just closing out the world and trying to recover. And then slowly I realized I needed to get another job because I quit my job. So I then started another job. And then a few months later, my mom came to visit, and they had been to the UK several times, but this time she came without my dad. And it was strange having my mom come without my dad. And so we traveled. She wanted to see Shakespeare's home and Anne Hathaway's cottage. So we had a great couple months. She saw my daughters. And then I hugged my mom at Manchester Airport. And I just didn't know that that would be the last time that I would hug my mom. And she passed away in her sleep a few months later. I was calling, I was trying, we talked every day. And so I just knew something was wrong. So I said, everybody, get there. My mom's best friend found her. She had peacefully died in her sleep. So I went back to Seattle, did another eulogy, stood up in front of everyone, said, love you all. I'm so tired of seeing your faces. Like, I don't want to do this again. I quit, right? And the home that I lived in was the one that I grew up in, that my parents lived in. Was I grew up in that home. So putting everything together, selling it, like all of that. And then I came back after a few weeks, and 2 months after my mom passed away, I got the call in the middle of the night that my 24-year-old son-in-law passed away from a fall in front of my daughter and his workmates. And that was really the most devastating phone call that I've ever received. And so between 2018 and 2019, in 22 months, I lost 12 loved ones. So I had lost friends, children throughout that short period of time. And that these losses change you at a deep core level, and they change the trajectory of your life, and you're not the same. And I tried everything, all the different modalities, everything, like anything. I did it all: sound baths, therapy, all of it, everything from kind of woo-woo to personal development. And trying to navigate compound grief is really difficult. And what it does is it also highlights areas of your life you're unhappy. You realize life is super short, it's really fragile. And that's when, about a year after Jack passed away, I sat my husband down of 28 years and just said, you're unhappy, I'm unhappy, I've got to go. And he's like, yeah. And so amicably, we divorced. And I moved into my flat and I breathed. It was one of the first times in a long time that I just healed in this safe space, but I didn't do it alone. And so that is what kind of changed my life. I then hired a life coach. I was like, well, now what? Like, what do I do now? So I hired a life coach, and I thought, oh my God, like, this is what I want to do. And so I went down the certification and accreditation, and so I knew what I wanted to do as far as personal development, helping people who were stuck, hit their goals, take action. That was easy for me because I'd done it for so many years. But there was this nagging thing about grief, like grief. And I was like, I don't know that I want to do this. But to be fair, Sandra, it's a calling. And so that's how I became to doing what I do now.
So many things you said there resonated with me. And I'm always a big believer that when we coach or mentor, using our own lived experiences can be so powerful, because not only are we facilitating that transformation in somebody else, but we know exactly the course that it could take, and we can share our own experiences, which I think is so powerful. But when my dad passed away, the same thing. I moved in, cared for my dad. He got cancer. We knew his time was limited. What I didn't realise at the time, that I was going to end up doing the same for my mum. Although she's still with us, she's now got dementia in a care home, and you just have to throw everything in. And my mum going into a care home wasn't a death or bereavement. it was sort of a relief and release in some ways. And it was a bit like losing my dad, because what I knew as a family unit, and they'd been married for 65 years, what I knew as a family unit suddenly disappeared. And it is dealing with that time. I was gifted the pandemic. We went into lockdown a week after my dad passed away. So I think that was a gift of time and space for us that we needed. But, it's recognizing these things, isn't it? And when we get a calling, and you obviously have to have so many losses in such a short period, it's almost as if you stripped back your life after that and decided to go right back to square one. I'm stepping out of my life and I'm stepping into something new. Did you find that was a sort of, feeling? Was it a marker in the sand? Was it a pivotal moment?
It was, yes, it's exactly what happened. It's these things that you already know to be true. I already knew I was in an unhappy marriage. We were just kind of friendly friends, roommates. Um, but it isn't until that happened, like, wow, okay, you're literally hit with how fragile and short life is, especially when you see young people passing, which I had, 10-year-olds, 24-year-olds. Like, what am I doing? And that was absolutely key. Now, the other part of it was when we grieve, we don't just grieve our loss or carry our grief, we carry the grief of others, right? So you carry the grief of your family, so I'm carrying the grief of my daughters. And what I didn't want to do right away was say, hey, and by the way, I know that you've had all these losses and your mom and dad are getting a divorce. So I waited for at least a little over a year. And when I was working full time, again, same as you, the pandemic was absolutely horrible and destroyed so many lives. For me and my family, it closed the curtain. We didn't have to see anybody. We were able to then just heal, work from home, so you don't have to run to the toilets when you're crying. Like, you can just cry and tap on the keyboard. So for us it was the same. And I was typing away and I swear I heard, uh, Lisa, you need to be a life coach. Now, this is before I hired one. So I was like, what is that? I didn't even know. I'd never even heard, even though I'm from America, never heard of one. I had to Google what a life coach was. And I was like, oh, I kind of do the life coaching and mentoring anyway. So what is this? And I thought, well, if I'm going to be one, I need to hire one. And it was the best decision I ever made. And that was a real pivotal moment. But again, coming back to when we lost Jack and just trying to breathe in and out. So after losing my son-in-law and trying to help my daughter and her sister, my other daughter, um, and his family, I realized that in a split second, one diagnosis away can change your life. So I need to get living, right? I had a choice. And that's really what it amounted to at some point. Don't get me wrong. I was, in a ball in a corner for a long time, up and down and all over the place with grief. But I did make a conscious choice to take action to create change.
Yeah, and I think sometimes some people can't do that, though. I think it's recognizing that some people, do find themselves almost in victim mode, in a mode that they just can't seem to climb out of that despair. And I suppose, and there's been a real surgence of grief coaching recently. I mean, I think I know three now. And that's something that wasn't around before. So why now? Why has this come to fruition? Why do you think that people are now recognizing that this is something really valuable and something that people need?
Well, I think it's that whole saying, right? That there's two things that are certain in life, death and taxes. If you are living, you will experience loss and grief. That is a part of life. And I believe we were quite grief illiterate but we're becoming more grief literate. And I think we're starting to see and recognize the impact of loss, any type of loss, and how that can impact us emotionally, mentally, physically, relationally. And so, therefore, I think we're becoming more aware that grief actually plays a big part in our life, and we can't, sadly, avoid it. So what are we going to do? And again, like I said, grief is a very lonely road, but you don't need to do it alone. And I think that for me was really important, having great support, family, friends around me.
Yeah, and they talk a lot right now about the sandwich revolution that a lot of us women find ourselves in. We've got, maybe our children are just growing up and just leaving the nest or getting their own lives together, and then suddenly we're into the caring responsibilities the other end with our elderly parents, as you found yourself in. And I think maybe your mum coming to stay with you and spending that beautiful time with you, seeing all those things she wanted to see, it's given you obviously some very happy memories, although it was such a sad time, not, for that to be the last time that you saw her. But I now look back at the memories of my parents when they were in their good state, and they are happy memories. And I think I've grasped onto that rather than seeing them in their later years when they weren't at their best. I mean, we went, at the time of recording, we've just celebrated my mother's 94th birthday. And my sister-in-law said that my dad was the glue that held the family together, because my dad would be the cook, he'd be the entertainer, he'd be the person we gravitate to their house. Once my dad passed away, that glue disappeared. And we've all gone off and done our own things. And coming together as a family, there was 17 of us, coming together as a family for my mum's 94th actually made us remember we should do this more often.
Yes, yes, not just funerals and weddings.
And it is important, we lose people and they are the glue in some respects in our lives, but we need to keep that glue together. Without them, we need to move forward and celebrate them in a way.
Absolutely. And that, I think, is such an important message. Absolutely. We need to, and, I think for you and I, it sounds like you had a wonderful childhood, and so did I. Some people don't have that. So then there's a grief. It's very complex. If you have a complex relationship with your family or your parents,
Yeah.
and it's harder in some ways to navigate that because it's ambiguous. Like, I don't know, people don't quite get why you're not so sad. I spoke somewhere just a couple weeks ago, and this woman said, like, for me, when my dad died, he was a horrible human, I was relieved, but I couldn't tell people that. I had to fake my grief because they're like, oh, I'm so sorry your dad passed. And she
Yeah.
was like, I'm not, but I can't say that because then what does that make me look like? So it's very, very complex.
Yeah. See that. Well, sadly, we have come to the end of our time together, and I found this a fascinating subject. I really, really have. And it's been great to chat to you. I always ask my guests to leave my audience with a top tip, piece of wisdom, or something that you would like to share as your mic drop moment.
I would say, as my mentor, David Kessler, says, that you can fully live and fully grieve at the same time. Like, those two things can coexist. So you can fully live your life and be fully grieving at the same time.
Love that. And we'll share all your contact details in the show notes. Lisa Archer, it's been fantastic chatting to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.